what's up? Welcome back to another live stream here on Free Will Photos. Today, what we're going to be doing is hopefully getting round two of the nightmare of last or yesterday's live stream. Had some issues, so I took that video down, and we're just going to go ahead and revisit that. So if you didn't catch that, then that's fine, because what we're going to do is really do some simple edits that can really help you enhance a photo. And I'm going to give you kind of a workflow, so to speak, that when you sit down inside of any photo editing application, you'll be able to start working on your images in a way that gives you a step-by-step process, and you can remain consistent. Now, with that being said, I am using ON1 PHoto Raw 2024. If you want to save some money, like if you want to pick it up and save some money, then consider using the coupon code FreeWillPhotos20. That's going to save you some money at checkout when you pick it up. No extra cost to you. It is an affiliate link. You just get to save some money, and I make a little bit of money. So if the audio does start to cause issues, again, please let me know in the comment section below. And I am going to be monitoring those. So without anything else to say, let's jump into the computer and start editing. So here we are inside of Photo Raw 2024, and this is a photo that I took a few years ago of my daughter at a dance recital. And there's a few issues that I have with this photo, all right? There's a shadow on her face because of where the light was coming from, and I was also fairly new to photography at this point. This is like 1 year after owning a camera. And then there's also, just really the main issue is she's underexposed, but I want her to be more prominent and identified, because right now this kid in the background is actually kind of a distraction, but I don't want to have to crop the image because, that's going to cause me to lose some detail in the overall story of the photo. So what I want to do is get my exposure set first. And that is the first step to pretty much every photo that you want to work on, is figure out what exposure you need and how you need that to look. So ON1 2024 allows for this thing called Brilliance AI. And if I check this little box here, it's going to think itself through, and it's going to make the photo as baseline exposed as it can be. So this is before and this is after. It's not a very drastic change. And it also didn't correct the areas that I wanted it to correct. Now, one of the things that I'll mention about Brilliance AI is it kind of can give you this consistent look that many people who are using ON1 PHoto Raw, they would stop right here and then they would go on and start stylizing. I don't want you to do that if you're using this software, because you're not going to be expressing your own creative idea of what you want in the image. So Brilliance AI is a great starting point. And for that matter, every AI tool is just a starting point. All of the AI tools in photography need some form of modification. So it's important to understand how they work. I do have a video that goes over Brilliance AI. So I'm not going to go deep into detail about that here today. What I will do is pull down on the color, because I'm going to modify that separately and in a different way. So that's all I'm going to do. And to get access to that, because I was kind of just clicking, is if Brilliance AI is minimized, you'll click on the text that says Brilliance AI, and then you'll click on the text that says fine tune, and you can pull down on these sliders. And the sliders are really just proportionate to what's happening in the tone and color. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this, come down to tone and color, and then I am going to start with my tone. All right, color is pulled up here because that was the last portion. Like when I was editing some photos, that was the last thing I had going on, but not important anymore. All right, because now we're looking at exposure. And because I shot this using a digital negative format, which is, or raw format, which is a digital negative type of file. Um, if you are familiar with film from the old days of film cameras, think of the digital negative as that film that came out of the camera. It's not exposed. Well, whenever you do that with a digital negative, you get to choose your camera profile. And what I like to do whenever there's an issue of a subject that is a person underexposed and I want to bring more exposure to them, I like to use one of the portrait settings because it just naturally opens up shadows in the entire image. And I'm okay with that because I'm going to like back those shadows down later and you'll see that technique. This is all still part of getting that exposure. All right. Your camera profile does play a part in getting exposure whenever you shoot negative or in a raw format. If you shoot JPEG or TIFF, you're not going to have this option, so don't worry about it. All right. And I guess you don't shoot TIFF. If you're editing a JPEG, a PNG, or a TIFF file, you're not going to see this. So I'm just going to come down here to camera portrait because I think that that works out pretty well. You could choose whatever you want. I'm just going to go with camera portrait. Then what I'm going to do is look at the exposure. I think it's exposed well. I'm going to open up some shadows and see what that does to her face. And this is opening up the shadows across the entire image, but I'm just looking at her face right now because I'm okay with making these edits over the entire image the way that it's going. Um, I think I'm actually satisfied with what this is doing. If I hold down the backslash key, this is what originally came into ON1, and this is what I've edited so far. Now, what you'll see is there's a little bit of digital noise on her face. This is common in digital cameras. If you want to modify this, the way that you can do that is you can come down to noise and sharpening, and then I can click on this little red thing that says adjust, and it's going to process this image. Um, this particular photo, I don't know if it's actually working uh, well enough, in my opinion. Um, I'm not getting the results that I would like to get. And this is going to be different for every photo. This is going to be different for every photo editor. But I'm just not seeing the no noise AI kind of make this make sense for what I would expect to see. I'm okay with the noise in the image. I think it adds character. It adds a little bit of texture to the overall image. But the high detail one, definitely, I don't like what it's doing to the raincoat. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Noise processing is always a challenge. It's never easy. So uh, take that, with a grain of salt. But if you're okay with noise being in your image, then I think, we can move on from here. So now I have my exposure set. The cool thing with ON1 is whenever you set your exposure, it's happening in this first tab, which is develop, and it's happening, and then you can fine tune that exposure in the second tab, which is local. So this is going to be the second step. So get your baseline exposure and then fine tune your overall exposure. This is going to be inside of the local tab where we are right now. What I'm going to do is go ahead and double click exposure to reset that. And the goal that I have here is I want all of the attention to be on my daughter. Now, there's some AI masking tools that we can use. I'm going to go ahead and click on the mask here, and you'll see, let me close out my properties pane. When you click on a mask in ON1, it opens up this property pane. And when the properties pane opens, you have a few options here. When you're on the masking tab, I'm going to click on the region drop down, and I can do foreground, which it's including that person in the background. And I'm not a huge fan of having that person there, but I may have to work with that. And then I also have people. And there's man-made ground, which not all really concerned with, and then architecture. So I think I'm going to go with foreground because that does select my daughter in the foreground, but I also want that umbrella selected. So I'm going to show you how you get that. I'm going to go ahead and leave this on paint in because it doesn't really matter for this particular effect. I just want to be able to see it as I'm selecting everything. So I'm going to hit apply, and it's not going to do anything originally because I haven't made any changes over here in the settings. And then we got Calvin saying what's up from Lake Maine. Well, welcome. Thank you for hanging out this morning. Um, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and pull up on the exposure. And this just helps me see where I'm about to apply this adjustment. All right. Bear with me. It's going to make sense. Then what I'm going to do is take my brush tool and I'm just going to paint this away from this person in the background because I don't want her to be in my mask. But what I do want in my mask is this umbrella. And I'm going to paint this very loosely. You can take time painting it more detailed, but painting it loosely is going to get me the effect that I think I'll be okay with because that's all that I really need. So now that I have my mask, if I hit the letter O, and looks like I need to paint a little bit more over here. Uh, and if you're new to masking, white shows the effect that you're going to add in, and black hides the effect that you're trying to add in. So all I'm doing is making sure that my daughter and that umbrella, which I have there, are all added into the mask. And then what I'm going to do is one, pull down on the exposure, and that looks terrible. But then I'm going to click this little half circle shaded in and half circle empty. And I'm going to go ahead and click that. That's going to invert the mask. So now I'm applying this to the back of the image. And my daughter is starting to stand out a whole lot more. And this is kind of the effect that I'm going for. I wanted her to kind of be the star of this image. But now I need to feather this out so that way it's not so tight. And it kind of gives, this hone in effect on her. Now that could be a little too strong. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that back just a touch. And I'm going to do a second mask. So this one is going to be BG darken because that's what I'm doing. I'm darkening the background. We're going to hit add subject and we're going to we'll come up here and select the actual masking bug, which I already have in my secondary tool well. So I'm just going to go ahead and click here. That's going to add a vignette, and her face is probably the area that needs to be the most brightest portion. It's terrible English. Her face needs to be the brightest portion of the photo. And then what I'm going to do is just pull this out very, very slightly. Maybe pull this down a little bit and pull down on the exposure so that way everything outside of this circle, right, the letter O, nothing in the center here is going to get the effect. So that's keeping its original brightness, but everything outside as it fades out to this dotted line is going to gradually get darker until it takes 100% of whatever effect I put over here. And then what I like to do is pull down on the structure a little bit. And that gives me the final look that I'm probably going for with this image. So this is before I came into ON1 PHoto Raw, and this is after I've come into ON1. And this just helps me take a quick snapshot of my daughter and turn it into something that I would be able to share with friends and family. And it looks pretty good, especially for me learning how to use a camera early on in my photography career. So this is one of those older photos that I'm just enhancing. Now, let's say her face is still a little too dark. Well, we can add another local adjustment, and I can just go ahead and paint over her face. And then instead of an exposure adjustment, I'm just going to open up shadows. And, oh, and then we'll pull down on or pull up on the feather, I'm sorry. And maybe pull this down just a little bit. Contrast it, because one of the things, whenever you open shadows, one of the things to take into consideration, whenever you open shadows or you boost exposure, you're going to want to replace some of that contrast because things get brighter. And if you don't replace that contrast, then you can get a very flat looking image. So this is without that contrast. As I pull up on the shadows, you can see it starts to get like bright and it starts to get flat. But if I pull up on the contrast here, look at how much depth I'm adding back into her face. One of the things with photography is we need shadows and we need light in order to create depth in our images. If you take away all of the shadows in your image because you get excited and you pull up the shadows like super duper high, you're going to take away the contrast and the depth in your image, and it won't have as much impact overall. Something will look off, and it's probably because it doesn't have any dynamic range to it. So I apologize. My I'm yeah. Anyway, um, hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, just let me know in the comment section, and I will be more than happy to help answer that particular question. And then I usually pull down on the blacks just a little bit. That may be too much. And again, this just helps with building that contrast, takes the black point and it just moves it a little bit darker. So that way that contrast really does kind of shine through. Now, if I turn this off and on, you can see what it's doing to the face. And, that could be very helpful for an overall image. Maybe a little too strong for this particular image. And that's where you can pull down on the opacity until it gets to a place where it just makes sense. All right. So that is the first image. First step, hit Brilliance AI, then come down to tone and color, adjust some of your exposure settings to make it make sense for your image. Then come into the color section and modify that as well. Then come into the local and really refine the exposure that you have. Now, some people are going to ask me, well, Chris, why don't you use the local adjustments that Brilliance AI makes? The reason I don't use those is because I have not found them to be as helpful. I like to have control over my own personal edits. And if you are a beginner, then sure, you can go ahead and use those local adjustments so you can kind of get an idea of what happens with local adjustments. But I personally don't care for them. Not that they're 100% awful. It's just I'm not a fan of the software making a decision of where I should have local adjustments. And I find that the adjustments that it makes are not the ones that I would personally make. So instead, I'd rather just do my own local adjustments. And, this is just, I have experience in that area. If you feel like you need to use some of the local adjustments that On1 is creating for you, then by all means go for that. But I'm comfortable working in the local adjustments tab. I've edited and developed images with only the local adjustments tab. And I just love working in there, making my own masks. So, I'm using some of the AI tools because I do want to showcase that you can use some of the AI tools if masking is like foreign language and you are just overwhelmed with what masking can offer. That's why I'm showing how to use the AI tools. I still think that you should learn how to mask individually, like instead of using AI tools, that you learn how to do the masking yourself. But if for whatever reason you need to use the AI tools, they're there, and that's why On1 put them in here. So it's worth at least knowing how to use them. But I still think it's way better to make your own mask. Now, one of the things that I was going to do is kind of work with the colors in the overall image. So I'll come over to effects. And you got to forgive me. I should have been looking at my notes as I was kind of going through this, but I like editing and I just get going. So, first step in editing a photo is to develop your exposure. All right. That happens in the develop tab over here. Sorry, my voice keeps cracking. Second, you want to build contrast. I built that contrast by darkening the background and brightening my subject or my foreground. All right. You can build contrast in a lot of different ways. You can also reduce noise during this phrase or during this period. I recommend that you do it sooner rather than later in your workflow because reducing noise does change the overall tonality of your image. So you want to do it in the tone building stage of your photography or your edit. Um, then the second thing is, which I kind of did as I was building the contrast, is you want to identify your primary subject, which in this image, it was my daughter or is my daughter. She's the primary subject. Your primary subject could be a tree, it could be a rock, it could be a boat, it could be a car, it could be an airplane, it could be anything. Your primary subject should be obvious to the viewer of the image. I didn't want people to think like, well, I was trying to take a picture of this kid and this kid kind of took up the frame and photobombed it. No, like I want everyone to know this is a photo of my daughter. This kid just happens to be in the background. You can't change certain things at an event whenever you're photographing. So that's why I went ahead and I photographed in this way, or edited, making sure that she was the prominent subject in the photo. Makes it easier for your viewers and it makes you a little bit more sane as you're editing. Um, and then what you want to do is amplify the subject, which that was opening the shadows on her face. That's all inside of local. The next step is really building your style for the image. Building your style for the image. The way that you can do that in On1 PHoto Raw 2024 comes in two ways. I'm going to go ahead and close this properties pane real quick. One, I can come over to effects and I could add in all of the effects that I think I should add to this particular photo and build that style, and that'll be great. Or I can come over to the AI Style Advisor, and this is kind of cool. The my style sometimes gives me some styles that I would actually apply to the image, and sometimes it doesn't. And in this case, it's not offering up anything that's black and white, so everything here is color. And you know, you can kind of hover over these. Most of them are doing the exact same thing because apparently I only have one style that On1 can pick up uh, right now. But as you edit more, I believe it starts to track what you do. So that way you can start editing your images based off of that style. Now I'm going to come over to the On1 team suggested presets for this, or suggested style, I should say, for this particular image. And I think that these are kind of cool. So the way that I like to look at these is I can either hover my mouse over them, or I can click this little icon that has the four little squares. And this brings up a viewing pane with all of the images. And, you know, it's kind of bugging out right now. Let me go back one. Go back and let's try that again. So normally it'll bring up all of the presets here or the styles, but for some reason it's not doing that today. Whenever it does that, you can just scroll through and find a style that you really like, But for today and right now, because ON1 isn't cooperating, we'll see if any of these, by hovering over this with the mouse, will work out and update. But for some reason, it's not even doing that. So I don't know. Promises does work, just not right now. And that's the story of my life with ON1. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. And yeah, like that. I don't know why that preset that I clicked on didn't actually go in. So let me close that out, reopen the Style Advisor, see if we can troubleshoot this on the fly. This, again, is the reason why I do these live streams, because, you know, things don't work the way we expect them to, but you still got to keep moving, right? Um, Maybe I like this preset, and yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to spend too much more time on that, but just know that there are the styles here. Now, I don't recommend that you always use these styles if you know how to edit and you have a vision in mind already. Of course, you could add a preset, but sometimes the presets, they're all over the place and it could be a little hard to figure out which one you want. Um, and so that's why knowing what effects you want to apply to your image to make them pop does help. Case in point, this particular image, I would probably add a color enhancer. And let me pull up on the vibrance just a touch here. And maybe the saturation. I'll click on the mask icon here. I'm going to get my properties pane. And I want to apply this to everything uh, except for the skin tones. So what I'm going to do is invert this mask by clicking the little half filled circle here. Take my brush tool, turn it to paint, and then I'm just going to very loosely paint this over these areas. And I'm not doing a perfect job with the mask because I'm going to start working with the actual colors. But because I did a vibrance and saturation increase, I want to make sure that that information is getting picked up here. So I'm going to come into the reds. I don't know what's going on. Okay, I guess it was already selected. It's a little hard to see sometimes if you have what color you have selected. So uh, make sure you read right here where it says what color you have. Get a quick sip of coffee. Okay. So now what we're going to do is pull up on the saturation for the reds. If I desaturate it, you can see what's happening there. Do I not have that? Yeah, I don't have that bottom part of the umbrella. So let's get the entire umbrella. And, you know, this is one of those reasons that you should do extreme adjustment sometimes. It allows you to catch silly things like that, where I didn't have a good portion of the umbrella adjusted. So now I can go ahead and really like make this stand out, right? Now, again, because I'm making that red color brighter, it's losing some of its depth. So what I want to do is probably make it a little bit darker. Not to the point where, you know, it's like darkening everything. We just want to build a little bit of depth into the image. So I'm just messing with the hue of it to see what makes the most sense for this particular look. I think pulling it a little bit more towards the uh, whatever color this is, magenta. I know my colors. It's just early in the morning. So now what I'm going to do, I think I already have the raincoat area painted. I'm going to actually change my overlay to the red overlay so that way I can see what I have selected. So anything that's covered in red, whenever you use the red overlay, is actually going to hide the effect. But anything that's not hidden, i.e. not covered in red, that means you're going to apply the effect there. And so on this particular image, I'm going to apply this effect to everything that is uh, in the yellow raincoat with the boots and everything, because that's what I am painting over right this second. And this is why it's good to know how to use the masking tools, because if you let AI do everything for you, you're just going to be hurting a little bit. I get the draw and why people would want to use AI to do everything because we want to speed stuff up. But I think there's something to be said about taking your time with a photo, especially something that you really want to share. Now, if you are a mass producer and you just have to get photos out, like turn them really quickly, I get it. Use the AI, produce your images, because if I photograph events from time to time, and I'll come home with, you know, sometimes thousands of images, 2,500 images at some point, 3,000 images at some point. And then I have to get through those images. That takes time. So I do use AI tools to kind of siphon through those, and then edit those so that way I can get down to a set of images that I'm ready to deliver. So I'll go ahead and hit the letter O. We'll come over to the yellow and let's saturate the yellow a little bit more. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And maybe we'll pull the brightness up, pull down, pull this, the hue more towards like a orangish tone. And I think that looks pretty good. So if I turn this off and on, you can see I'm really modifying that color. And this is, again, where you start getting into stylizing your image. So let me now show you a huge stylizing tool, which is called a LUT. And then we got my man Tony on. He says, hey, my friend, this is the reason I use the masking brush, the masking with the brush. Yeah. I'm with you. Um, I personally love to use the brush tool to mask in everything. That's just a personal preference, but I understand why there's AI tools available. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the LUT here. And this doesn't look like it fits for this image. There are a ton of categories that I have installed on my machine. If you are part of the Plus membership or you pre-ordered ON1 PHoto Raw 2024, you can get a lot of these, all right? And I'm just showcasing this because there are some pretty good LUTs that can get you to a good style with little effort. All right. Again, I still think that you should probably focus on building out your effort a little bit more, but or building out your own styles, I should say. But sometimes it helps to have something that gets you there a little bit faster. So I'm going to go with something in the vintage category. And as I kind of just scroll through these, I'm using my arrow key on my keyboard to move down. I actually kind of like this one. So VS9. Let's go ahead and click that. And I'm going to maybe saturate it a little bit more. But this doesn't look so good on the image. Well, there's a few ways that you can start to use these LUTs, all right? The first way, I can just pull down on the opacity until I blend it in to actually give the look that I want to see on the image. So if I turn this off and turn it back on, you can see what's happening there. I'm not a fan of what's happening with the darkening of her face because we spent some time actually brightening that. One of the things that you can do is paint this away from the face. So if I wanted to, I can go Shift X and then just paint it away from her face. But to me, this doesn't actually fit the overall look. It's very mild and it does work, but it doesn't fit. So what I'm going to do instead, reset this mask, is I'm going to come up here to the blending options for this particular layer or this effect, the LUT effect, and I'm going to select color as my overlay or my blend mode. What that does is it only applies color. It doesn't adjust any of the contrast or blend with the luminosity of your image because I just spent all that time building that up. I don't want to impact that. All I want to do is have this impact the colors of the image, not the exposure or contrast in the image. And so that's exactly what it's doing now. It's only applying color to the overall image. And I like that a whole lot more. And it helps with her face blending in. Now, if for whatever reason this gets a little too heavy, what I can do is pull down on the opacity here for my brush tool. I can paint this away just briefly from her face. So here is the before photo where it was like a black spotlight over her face. And here is the after photo where she is a little bit more prominent in the photo and shines through. I think that this came out pretty good. Let's go ahead and click browse. We'll go back and we'll find another photo to edit. Okay. Let's go with this photo. Actually, let's go with this photo. So again, another photo of my daughter when she was much younger. Uh, you can see there are some challenges with this image, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to resolve every single one of the issues that I see in this image. However, we're going to resolve as many of them as we can, and we're just going to do this live because this is how I edit. I look at an image, I say, okay, what is it that I want to do? Well, the first thing I have pretty decent exposure. The photo is well lit. It's a little faded. And if I come up here to the info, and thank you, Tony, I appreciate that. Um, I was using a D5200, 50 millimeters. I was at 1.8. So I'm probably not in focus entirely on this image. Again, this is earlier on in my career. I started photography in 2012. So this is a year later-ish, give or take. And yeah, I I probably missed focus, but I didn't understand chromatic aberration, and that's the biggest issue because my daughter doesn't have green hair. So how do I fix that? And there's this huge bright spot. If I hold down the J key, you can see that this is all blown out. This is a normal occurrence when you are starting out in photography. So if there's anyone out there who's looking at this and you're like, oh man, I got a photo that I just don't know what I'm going to do with it because it just looks terrible, that's okay. This is a normal occurrence. All right. Here's how you can start to fix it. Let's go ahead and minimize the info section. And I'm going to click Brilliance AI. I'm going to let this think itself through, see what it does. And just like that, I have contrast in the photo. I have color in the photo. I have the chromatic aberration a little bit more pronounced, but we're going to figure that out here in a little bit. And overall, I'm enjoying what I'm getting in this photo. All right. That's what a single click. So if I show you the before and the after, this photo has come to life. I can really work with this. All right. In fact, I like this AI edit so much that I'm not even going to try to fine tune the Brilliance AI aspects of it. I'm just going to go ahead and keep moving along. And so I got to fix the elephant in the room, which is this chromatic aberration. So, or color fringe is what it's called here. Sometimes chromatic aberration will show up green or magenta. And it's really just an issue where the lens doesn't understand how to transition between a point of brightness to a point of darkness that transitions really quickly. You can notice that here in the window, it's really, really bright. And then it goes to her hair, which is really dark compared to what is going on in the window. The lens itself, it just doesn't have the elements to help with that transition. So it captures this green little fringe. So that's normal. It happens, especially this was a nifty 50, a lower quality purchase, but you can move around this color fringe slider and see if that resolves anything. And it doesn't seem to be doing much for me. Then I can come over here to the fall off, and I don't think that that's going to help any. So this isn't working. How do I fix this problem? I'm going to show you the way that I would go about fixing this particular problem because of the fact that this is all white back here. I really just need to make this green desaturated. That's the thought. Make it desaturated. Well, how do I desaturate this? I'm going to come over to local. The reason I'm going to do this in the local adjustments as opposed to putting a black and white adjustment on this is because if I wanted to stylize this image afterwards, when you click one of these presets that are over here, most of the presets are designed as just adding in effects. It won't adjust your develop or your local adjustments because that is something that's going to be specific to each photo. The effects are more of the style. So if I add this correction for the color fringing in the local adjustment section, when I go to click on a style, it's not going to be overridden, or I don't have to worry about it being overridden. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, just let me know in the comment section below. But I'm going to go ahead and click on adjust. And the first thing that I'm going to do is grab my zoom tool and I'm going to zoom in because I want to sample that green. And I want to sample it into a color range mask. The way to get a color range mask is by clicking on the mask option here. And then I'm going to grab this little eye picker by turning on the color range mask. I'm going to grab this eye picker by clicking it. And then I'm just going to hover over somewhere where this green is where I can get a good sample. I think right here is probably a good spot. I'm going to click there and it's sampled that green. I'm going to hit the letter O. And I think it did a pretty good job remembering. Let me hit Command 0 to zoom out a little bit. So it's adding in everything down here, which I don't want it to add in. So we'll fix that here in a little bit. But it got all of the green up here. And then I'm okay with the windows getting a little bit of this desaturation effect because guess what? They're already blown out. I'm just going to make that white. That's all I'm really doing here. So I'm okay with that. But I will pull down on the color range just a little bit so that way it's more focused on that green. And I think that's going to be okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull up on my feather because anytime you use one of these range masks, it's always a good idea to feather the ends so it blends better with the overall image. Now what I'm going to do is turn off this mask. And in fact, I'm going to change that back to grayscale as well. And I'm going to come over to my adjustment. I'm just going to pull down on the saturation. And you can see a lot of that green has gone away. It did not get the green back here in the hair. So I'm going to hit the letter O. And I'm just going to pull up on this range until I see that green go away. I'm just going to pull up until I see it go away. And I think about there is good. But now if I hit the letter O, you can see I'm getting all of my daughter into this particular photo or this edit. But I need this to be this high in order for it to, really desaturate that green in that area. So this is where advanced masking really does come in handy, knowing how to brush all of this away. And all I have to do is hit Shift X and I can paint this away. Oh, I better pull up my opacity to 100%. And I can just paint this away from all those areas that I don't want this effect to be in, which is pretty much everywhere else in the image. And, for whatever reason, my mouse is lagging behind, but I'm just going to paint this over the rest of the image here, like so. And hopefully making pretty quick work of this issue with the color fringing. Not perfect, and I'm okay with that green fringe on the windowsill there. And I'm going to come across these hands. I'm actually going to use the perfect brush by hitting Command R, and we'll zoom in just a touch here. Move that over. And all I'm going to do with the perfect brush is come around the edges of the hand. Again, I didn't expect to get this perfect because I know that it's hard to get this color fringe perfectly removed. But it's going to be less obvious now than it was when I originally started this edit. And that's ultimately what I'm going for, is making it less obvious than what it was. It does take some time. All right. I get it. We all need to value our time. But photo editing, if you rush through it, you're gonna get obvious results that you rushed through something. As opposed to if you take your time and really learn how to use the tools, you're going to be okay. I like to think of this as the artistry of photo editing, where when you take your time and you develop whatever the style is that you're going for, it's going to help you out that much more versus not. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think I did it right here as well. Um, it's one of those things, you just got to take your time and it's okay. Now, for the sake of this tutorial, because I don't want to take up all your time while you watch me try to perfect this particular mask, even though, I could sit here all day and just kind of hone in on this and paint this the way that it needs to be. Um, Yeah, so and Tony's saying that you could take a black mask and paint the green away as well. Um, which that's true. I could, I'll show you what he's talking about here, or at least what I think he's talking about. I need to come back over here, Command and 0. We'll zoom that bad boy out. So let me just show you what I got here. If I turn this off and turn it back on, looks like I missed some stuff over here. But, you know, again, taking the time to paint this, you can see how much of a difference this makes in the image. Now, what I think Tony is saying, and you got to correct me if I'm wrong, what you can do is with ON1, local adjustments are also, there's a paint with color option. Um, and, or, better yet, I would probably just desaturate the entire image and invert this so the entire image gets that desaturation, because I think this is what he's talking about. Again, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Tony. You desaturate the entire adjustment, you invert it so it's over the entire image, and then what you do is, Or maybe I don't need to invert it. I could just paint it in like this, which this can go a little bit faster, as you can see. And it's getting essentially the same result that I got previously for the most part. So tons of ways to do stuff like this. And when you get closer to the skin, you'll have to really take your time. But made pretty quick work of that defringe issue that I was having, and kind of preserve the photo. So hopefully that is what you were talking about. Okay, this is what Tony was talking about. Um, so I got it. This is what Tony was talking about. And I just wanted to make sure that I showed that as well, because there's so many ways of solving problems with photos. And that probably should have been like the subtitle to the this particular live stream, is how to solve multiple problems, because that's essentially what you're doing in an edit before you get to the stylizing portion. All right. But now that I have that taken care of, her face, I think, is probably just the way that it should be. But let's go ahead and make her pop off of the background. All right. And we did this in the last photo, so this isn't anything earth shattering, groundbreaking, but it's a technique that I think needs to be expressed as often as possible. And that's just darkening the background and brightening the foreground. So with that, I'm going to select an adjustment here, and I'm going to click on the mask. And this does a pretty decent job using the AI tools to select just the background. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and I'm going to paint in and then hit apply. This is going to make the background darker than my daughter who's in the foreground. Again, whenever you apply these types of masks, I recommend feathering at least just a little bit, and it's going to add this interesting halo, and I'm kind of okay with that for a very short period of time. However, what I'm going to do now is add another adjustment, and this time I'm going to take the mask that we just created. I'm going to copy that, and I will paste it into this area and then invert it. And we'll go ahead and open shadows. And so this is actually a great opportunity for me to show you what I was talking about. If you open the shadows too much, look at all the contrast that I lost in this image. That to me is not, it looks very flat. But as you start to add that contrast back, look at how much dynamic, or not dynamic range, depth that I'm getting back in the image. We need shadows to perceive how far something is in a two-dimensional space. If you don't have shadows in your photos, it's going to be really hard to make something that is compelling. All right. Now, again, that's like overbaked way too much, not what I was really going for there. So we're just going to reduce all of that, and I will increase this just a touch. I'm going to bring down the blacks, and I realize her hand is not where it ought to be, because her hand is getting this effect, and I don't want it to get that effect. And I probably need to fix that in the other mask, as well as this area down here, because this is brightening everything down here. Probably should have checked the mask by hitting O, and yeah, that is not what I want. So we'll go ahead and Shift X that, which allows us to get an eraser brush, and we can erase all of the areas that we don't really need added into this brightening effect. And I'm doing a pretty botched job of this because it's okay. And then I can, bring this in over her hair here. So that way I get rid of some of those halos and make this a little bit more user friendly and uh, ultimately make it something that I can publish, share with friends, whatever. You know, most of our photos nowadays are going on some sort of social media platform. I do print my photos, and I would not print this as is, but I do prep my photos for printing, either through a professional print lab or something that I print right here at the house with my HP little inkjet printer, which works pretty good. So I feel like I've gone on a little bit of a journey. I've shown how to correct some of the issues that you may be running into with your photography, as well as expressing some ways of stylizing your images so that way you can get the things that you want out of your image. I answered some questions along the way and, hopefully provided some valuable information. Now, if you got questions, I do my best to answer all of those questions. You can send me an email at freewellphotos@gmail.com, or you can come over to my website, freewellphotos.com, and fill out my contact form, send me a message there. I take video requests because my goal is to help show you how you can use the software to get the end result you're going for. I'm not perfect at this, and On1 is not a perfect piece of software, as you have seen. But learning how to use the tools like a true artist will give you the flexibility you need in order to get the artwork that you're looking for or the overall outcome that you're going for. So, that's the whole drive behind me making these live streams and posting videos and content in general, because I want to make sure that I'm helping get that information out there to anyone who may be looking for that. So if that's you, then just send me a note and we'll figure something out to get you squared away. I do have a bunch of stuff here on the channel that will hopefully help with that as well. So until next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.